So I'll go ahead and introduce our volunteer program. It's fairly, at least I'm fairly new to GreenThumb. I've been at GreenThumb for about a year and a half. Before that, I was working in nonprofits, specifically in the NYC Compost Project. So I'm excited to bring that expertise and also learn from our community gardeners so I can become a better gardener in NYC. And our volunteer program specifically supports the ongoing work of our 20,000 community gardeners by organizing collaborative volunteer events, connecting with local volunteers and partners, and also engaging new people in transformative garden projects. So today's workshop, our purpose is to share and explore tips and tools and also resources for your group, which you can adapt, you can edit as you see fit to make sure that it works well with your own planning process. And I just want to premise here is I'm speaking from my own experience as a volunteer program coordinator within and outside of GreenThumb. So I welcome you to share your own experiences, your own advice, and especially your own resources in the chat so we can all learn from each other. And just so you know, we are going to be taking a few breaks throughout the presentation to answer questions. So whenever you have a question you'd like to ask, feel free to pop it in the chat. And then Adder and Jessica can also flag them, record them so that we can answer them during the breaks. And we'll also have time at the end as well. Okay, just so that we're on the same page, we've outlined what we're going to cover in today's workshop. Very specific, and we'll try to do the best that we can to cover all of this in the hour and a half that we have. So today we're going to talk about communicating a community-focused and mission-driven project, how you can explore an asset-based community development approach, understanding the lead and supporting roles within your garden project, reviewing the logistical aspects of a garden project, creating a positive and rewarding volunteer experience with your members and new volunteers, as well as external resources available to your community gardening groups. All right, so you might be thinking, why would I want to host a volunteer day? Well, volunteer days are not only fun in the garden, but can also help in many ways for your group development, for getting things done at the garden. As we know, it takes many hands to sustain an active community garden in the city, and volunteer days can help bring together garden members as well as welcome new prospective members that can help tend to the garden and tackle projects large and small. Existing garden groups can also hold a wealth of knowledge and skills that they can share for the next generation or your neighbors and other stakeholders within your community. And volunteer days also provide people with the opportunity to teach and learn valuable skills and pass down that garden knowledge. Lastly, and I think most importantly, volunteer days bring people together. They instill a strong sense of community. Personally, I often hear and have experience working collectively towards a common goal, and providing community support can give people a sense of belonging. So although volunteer days can provide a lot of benefits to your group and your community, sometimes it can take a little bit of effort to bring this idea into fruition. So today we're going to go over the building blocks to start your planning process and see how you can apply the tips and tricks that you learned today to your own volunteer days. Okay. So the building blocks, I've kind of organized it into these categories, and we'll go through each of them. So why would you want to host your volunteer day? What is the purpose and specifically the impact that you're making within your garden group and your community? How are you going to recruit volunteers? How are you going to access resources? How do you form and maintain partnerships? Who exactly is in charge of planning, organizing your workday? Who are the supporters? Who are your allies within setting up your workdays? What type of tasks are you going to aim to accomplish, and how long would it take? And specifically the whereabouts of your community event and how you're going to set it up within your physical space and when you're going to be doing it. Okay. So we're now getting into the nitty gritty. We're going to start off with the purpose of your workday. And volunteers often have more motivation to support causes that communicate a strong mission statement, as well as aligning with their own goals and how they want to impact the community. So the questions that you might want to answer within your community group is, what is the purpose of your workday? What will it achieve? And how will that volunteer workday impact the garden and community? If your group understands the impact of the workday, you can better communicate the importance of your work and inspire others to get involved. So I personally, when I lead a workday, I make sure that at the beginning and with the entire group, we are doing community agreements, but also acknowledging what the goals of the workday and how those specific volunteers and members are impacting their own community. So for example, do you see from the picture on the right, we did a collaborative workday with the garden group at El Garden. And ahead of the workday, we worked together to identify what a successful volunteer day may look like. So for this project, the group specifically aimed to engage and recruit a culturally diverse group of volunteers so that it better reflects their own community and they're able to communicate with a diverse group as well. They also wanted to rebuild several community beds, which will in result grow food to be distributed to the members and the general public. So that sort of mission statement will help drive the rest of the planning process to ensure you're achieving these goals. So groups like yours and like El Garden, once you've kind of established those goals, I would say that's always like the first step. I always ask groups like, why do you want to host a volunteer workday? What do you want to get out of it? The next question usually is, okay, how are we going to make it happen? And garden groups may be stumped with this challenge because they could be tackling a large project with special needs, or they'd be tackling a small project that maybe they're just recruiting a specific group. And while it's important to understand your garden's needs and its gaps, like we need to do this, we need to achieve that, and we need specific materials, it's equally crucial to recognize your own strengths and assets first, and then we can identify exactly what you need. So I suggest start by looking within your own community, your own group, and consider adopting an asset-based community development approach. So acronym ABCD approach. So it's basically a more sustainable approach to community-driven development and identifies and leverages an existing community asset across a variety of categories, which we'll outline in the next slide. Instead of stressing the negativity within your group, you're stressing the strengths and the capacities that are already existing within your garden group and the community. And then something that we're going to go over today in 2 slides from now, we're going to go over how to use a community map to locate and connect those available local assets within your community. So that's where I start first with garden groups, is kind of identifying resources they already have within the community rather than outsourcing it to maybe GreenThumb or local officials or just folks and organization outside of their own community, because those are more sustainable and more reliable when you're finding resources that are very close to you. So within the asset-based community development, you're usually identifying these groups of local assets, individuals or individual gifts. You're looking for like-minded leaders, maybe teachers or experts in your own community. So for example, if you're looking to maybe have a day of building raised beds and you're looking for folks with that carpentry skill or the teaching skill, so identify folks that have those skills that you might need, and in return have them demonstrate those skills on a volunteer day. You may also be looking for associations. So who are the grassroots groups that are active in your community? Maybe they're not just other community gardens in your neighborhood, but maybe they're cleaning groups. Maybe they're youth groups. Maybe they are your mutual aid groups. So you might have similar values, similar goals. And so how do you connect with them so that you are leveraging each other's strengths and creating partnerships with them? Third is land and businesses. So you might have local businesses that may support the garden in a variety of ways. For example, this past Saturday, we were at Phoenix Community Garden in Ocean Hill, and the community group connected with a local coffee shop, and they provided a huge jug of tea just to support the day, ensure people are energized and hydrated for the workday. So even something simple like that is very effective for a volunteer day. Or sometimes there are businesses that might support you financially to fundraise for certain materials that you might need for the workday. So go door to door, let people know, communicate your mission-driven statement so that they are aware that they have the ability to support your garden. Then we have the local economy. That's mostly buildings, and then institutions. So which local institution will provide social support, physical resources, or maybe access to volunteers. So for example, you might have, again, a youth group that is looking to do more greening initiatives in their community. This is a great way for you to access those volunteers, introduce them to community gardening, and maybe establishing a partnership with them. And lastly, don't forget to find out who your elected officials are. So what are the current government initiatives in my community? How can we connect with them in terms of maybe outreach and promotional support, as well as maybe funding support for your garden too. So these are just 5 large categories that you may consider in terms of mapping out who in your community can help support the workday and form strong partnerships with them. So on the slide here is a community map. This is a very invaluable tool that I've used with groups time and time again to identify those local assets in more of a visual form and a more collaborative form as well. So I strongly recommend, as a group, coming together and setting up a geographical map similar to this one and walking around the community to see who are those local assets. Because sometimes you have Google Maps that can help you greatly, but it's a little bit more personal and intimate when you're with your group walking around together. And this is something that we did at Amboy Street Garden ahead of a volunteer workday. So last year's workday at Amboy Street Garden, which is located in Brownsville near Betsy Head Park. This is what we have. Actually, maybe I can use the laser. Oh, yes, the laser. If you can see that, that's great. I'm using a laser to point out Amboy Street Garden, which is pinned here. And what we did, we just did a semi-large map of a few avenues and a few streets, and we walked around this geographical location. This group specifically wanted to bring local associations. They wanted to engage with the youth and engage with neighbors in a planting project. So when we walked around, we actually noticed how many churches there are in just a small vicinity. So how can we partner with these local church groups that may be wanting to gather together at the garden on their own time, or maybe support the workday and learn how to garden? We also noticed some youth centers, community centers, as well as local libraries as hubs where people gather, and maybe they can provide us support with like outreach and promotional opportunities. So this type of map is pretty easy to use and can serve as a base for your own outreach efforts. But I recommend that you go maybe the extra mile, and when you are reaching out to these folks, building meaningful and specifically reciprocal partnerships. So it's not just a one-way effort. Like, how can you help me, right? That's a question that you would like answered, but also how can you help them? So communicating as you're reaching out to these folks, how a partnership will advance both your goals for your workday and maybe just your own garden season, as well as how can you advance your partner's mission. So it is maintaining that reciprocal relationship. And keep in mind that partnerships like that take a lot of time to develop and require ongoing effort. So ensuring that throughout the season you are checking in with your partners and communicating your goals. Maybe your goals have changed. Maybe you have another work day and see how they can support you for another one and how you can support them in the future. Okay, I think we're taking a break here.
Amazing. Yeah, we can pause here for questions or reflections on any of the tools and concepts that Kylene has already covered. I'm obsessed with this map, by the way, and it's also exciting to think about how it would look really different for every garden.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no comments in the chat yet, but we are running really good on time. So we'll just invite anyone to unmute with any questions or reflections about mission and purpose of your garden, or community mapping, asset-based community development, um, yeah, or any reflections that have come up for you so far. Has anyone, oh,
Yeah,
Colleen, go ahead.
I've got a question. I guess our garden situation is we have a long list of volunteers that is getting longer by the day. But only about 30 of those, right now we have like 130 on our volunteers list, but only 30 of those are active, and like maybe 10 of them show up regularly. So I don't know if that's normal for gardens in the city, or it's been really hard to just get participation, or maybe that's good participation. So I guess that's my question. Like, that's our situation. And yeah, how do you engage volunteers and members and get folks to show up?
Hi, Colleen. I'm trying to scroll to see. Oh, so you're from Union Street Development and Community
In
Garden
in Crown Heights, yeah.
in Crown Heights. Yeah. So I think that's a very common ratio in terms of like commitment from your members. I think that's super common, right? You have a long list of interested people, but then you have that small percentage of folks that are very active. And I think from in this day and age, I think people do appreciate flexibility in their participation within the garden and in the landscape that we're in. Sometimes it's providing a diverse types of opportunities for your gardening group. So there's some gardens that maybe only providing volunteer days on, let's say, like Saturdays from 10 to 2, but maybe not everybody can always make it that time. And if it's very consistent, that's great, and you'll find folks that are consistent for that date. But maybe doing a polling within your whole group, not sure if you'll get 100% answers, maybe doing a polling just to reevaluate who's in your group and what
Yeah,
ways you can diversify the opportunities.
yeah, we did that last year and we cut the list down by like 100 people.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I guess it's good to know that, just getting people to show up and get things done is a big deal. And
Mm-hmm.
we've managed to do that.
Do you feel like your garden, like how consistent is your garden in terms of like workload? Is it like, are you always there like weekly, or is it like a monthly gathering in terms of like your garden membership?
Um, like there are 40 people have their own plots, or they share plots. There's about 40 folks who come in and out, and we sign up to do open garden hours and various chores. That group is like the active, able-bodied folks are small. Um, but we've had a monthly, at least once a month, work day of different things, like based on the season. what's happening in the garden. We'll do like a Saturday, Sunday. Sometimes there's something midweek. And also whenever the garden's open, people can come in and do a chore or something, and then they're just like sign in and write down what they did and how long they were there.
Mm-hmm. And are folks that maybe don't have their own like plot or a shared plot, are they aware of like other opportunities that they can do in the garden? Maybe there's like landscaping work or like other small projects that they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we track their hours, and actually once they get to 20, then we're like, you show up all the time. You're great. What are some like more, do you want to get involved as a member? Um, and we are going to move towards having more communal growing spaces. Like we did that last year, but it was really hard to get folks to, I don't know, they were scared of growing things.
Right.
But it's just this slow, like acculturation process of getting them used to what it takes to come in and like be in a space and be in community.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that I would like to share an example of what I found successful from Phoenix Community Garden in Ocean Hill. They do a mentorship program or an apprenticeship mentorship program where, yeah, folks that maybe are scared of growing, or maybe they're on like a wait list for a plot, or just like unsure of how they can build community in your group. So folks get assigned with a seasoned gardener, like a new gardener with a seasoned gardener, and they help collaborate in a variety of ways, and then they do it for a certain amount of time, and then they like graduate into like a seasoned gardener. I don't know if there's opportunity within your group um,
Oh
in
yeah,
terms of mentorship.
yeah, we've talked about that, or having sort of an apprentice join a longtime gardener. Um, yeah, we're throwing a bunch of ideas around, like
Yeah,
co-gardening or like adopting a new member into your plot.
that sounds like a great idea. And honestly, I think you're doing so many great things.
Okay, we're doing.
You're doing so many great things, and that ratio that you have is super common.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes maybe we tap folks out of like, we're always doing something, and our garden is really big. So there's just a lot of work that always needs doing. So,
Right. Right. And maybe there are ways that you can also supplement some of that workload in maybe connecting with volunteer groups on something big. Like if you have a huge, like we're going to get like 30 beds rebuild, maybe that's an opportunity, not just for like your members to join in, but also a large volunteer group to get more stuff done. I know it's like one off, but sometimes just that opportunity plants a seed in volunteers' minds, like, oh, we can do this as a large group. I want to be involved. Um, so just some suggestions there. I don't know if I'm beating a
no,
horse.
no, these are really great. And sometimes it just takes someone to remind you of what's possible.
Right.
Uh, yeah, no, this is great.
Great. We do have one more question in the chat. Cherise says, I love finding partners to join in. I'm curious about ways the garden can give back, maybe to those partners. How do you establish a reciprocal relationship?
Yeah, of course. So I'm looking through Sharice's question. Let me see. So Sharice, that is a great question. I think that's very thoughtful as well. Um, Something that external groups really do appreciate is the ability to utilize a garden space, especially a green space that maybe they don't have um, reliable like access to at the moment, and being able to do more like outdoor activities. So while an external group might be able to support the garden in a variety of ways, maybe you can offer them like, hey, if in the summer do you want to do some public programming, you can utilize the space. So I think being able to access a green space is really valuable to these external groups. In terms of your volunteers that are present the day of, we are going to go through enriching the volunteer experience. So I will share more about how you can say thank you to volunteers as well. I hope that answers your question.
There's also a comment from Michelle. of Grant Shade Garden, which is a GreenThumb / NYCHA garden. The residents in the surrounding buildings do not come to the garden. Last season, lots of people signed up, but were not available during the summer. So maybe there's a question folded in there of like, how do you entice people who are living around your garden to come to your garden? How do you make those connections?
I wonder if, I apologize, I don't know like the ins and out of NYCHA, or if there's like other maybe clubs or groups within the NYCHA housing that you can tap into. Maybe there is an existing group that you can collaborate with, and I think it's getting people together. So maybe it's not within your garden first, maybe it's within another club where you can come together and get people's interest, and maybe do a general interest meeting first before doing like a volunteer day with gardeners. Because I think some folks might be anxious on what type of activity that they're going to get into, that they might be nervous or like less enticed. So maybe involving your neighbors in a different way, maybe doing maybe more of a potluck. I think people love free food, or like coming together and doing a meal. So maybe it's not something tied to gardening, maybe attracting your neighbors in a different way. It could be food, maybe it's doing music in the garden, maybe it's arts. So maybe bringing people together in a different fashion than gardening. I don't know if Ishel, you have further comment about that. If Neighbors for Greener Harlem was helpful last year. I remember meeting them at the volunteer day. A great partner. The garden is very sunless. Grant shade, yes. So yeah, other activities will work. Like last year, we did a volunteer day with Ishel and Grant Shade, and we did some fence work, cleaning up some artwork. So that's something that's effective to the garden, and also the folks that live in the area. They walk by that fence all the time. So maybe they're seeing something that's fresh, and they're seeing people working in the garden. And we actually did have members from the NYCHA complex walk by and get kind of excited, like, how do we get involved? So I think doing something interesting that way can even just catch people's eye, especially the folks that are in that neighborhood and in the complex. Said one of our seniors and one for our kids with music, food activities. It really brings people out. People love food and people love music. I see some really good engagement in the chat. Very happy about that. Are there any other questions?
Jinky had put in the chat, NYCHA houses have tent associations. Maybe try reaching out to them.
Ishel's name dropping. Chantal says, if you feed them, they will come. And not just food with knowledge. Yes, that is correct. That's a good point. Okay, I think I love the activity in the chat. We keep it going. More suggestions. I think it's really helpful. I'm going to keep going just in case maybe I go ahead of time. So I'm going to move on. And I didn't mention this at the beginning, but we are going to share the slides. I'm happy to share slides as well as the recording. So you can always reference this on your own time and with your group. Okay. So we're getting into, you've done your mission statement, you feel good about your goals. you've done your community mapping, you're getting closer to maybe a target workday. So in terms of like logistics, it's good to identify who are the stakeholders in your workday. And I've kind of like broken them up into these 5 groups, but they may look different for your group. This is how I've organized them. But we have the organizers. They're the driving force behind the workday that manage the logistics. They recruit volunteers and help secure the resources. So think of the organizers as like the umbrella of the entire workday. Ideally, they should be a well-coordinated group, and at least one organizer should be present on the workday to oversee everything, ensure that all these details are being communicated to the rest of the group. You have your leads who help guide volunteers and other team members during the workday. They might not be an organizer, but maybe they've been communicated about what's going on for the workday. They're helping support the organizers. So they generally understand the task at hand and can delegate those responsibilities effectively to the volunteers. So leads should be somewhat flexible and moving where help is needed rather than be tied to one specific task, because essentially they're delegating to the group. And for me, when I'm doing a volunteer day, depending on the group size, I like to assign at least one lead for every 10 volunteers. So this past volunteer day at Phoenix Community Garden, we had about 40 folks. So for us, we had about 4 leads, mostly from GreenThumb. And then we also encourage community gardeners to help support the leads too. We have instructors. They're the folks that teach the volunteers how to complete a specific task. So for example, one instructor may show volunteers how to cut a piece of lumber, while another demonstrates how to actually build a raised bed. And instructors are responsible for both guiding the volunteers and ensuring the tasks are done safely and correctly. And one person can, have multiple roles, but you should definitely have enough to spread throughout the whole volunteer day. Then we have volunteers. They're the hands-on participants who can assist the volunteer day tasks. They're not involved in the initial organization, but bring valuable skills, experiences, various abilities and talents. So it's important to create an inclusive environment and prepare for a diversity of volunteers. For example, I'm going to shout out Pelham Organic, Pelham Houses in NYCHA. We prepared specific tasks for a group of youth. So for this volunteer day, they were not able, or I guess permitted, to use more of those power tools. Maybe not building raised beds, but they were very energized and they're ready to move around. So we've assigned them to do more like spreading mulch, planting, so making sure that you understand the diversity of volunteers that you expect. And the last one, I kind of added this because there are allies that support the workday that might not be present at the workday. So these are like your local assets that provide resources and other forms of assistance. So this might include, again, maybe a donation of materials, help with outreach support, and other types of needs that you might have that maybe your local organizations and volunteers may not be able to support day of. The next section is about what projects your garden will tackle during the workday. And I see a question from Asia. I'm also looking at like the chat as well. So it kind of touches on Asia's questions about the limits of what a volunteer workday could be. And first, that depends on if you're, registered GreenThumb garden within the GreenThumb license, which you can review that in the handbook, or I believe that we have some workshops about the GreenThumb license as well, specifically for today's workshop, we're just going to be a little bit more general and encourage folks to consider using the SMART framework to lay out what your projects will be for the workday. So for folks that may be not familiar with the SMART framework, it lays out what's needed to execute your projects. So being very specific in your project, clearly define which projects will take priority and maybe projects that take less priority. We understand that there's always a lot to do in the community garden. There's constant work, but by specifying what tasks volunteers need to focus on, you set clear expectations and you keep them on track for the volunteer day. Your projects ideally should be measurable as well. So establishing ways to assess the scope of the project. For example, how many raised beds need to be built? How many raised beds need to be filled? How many beds do you want to plant tomatoes in? So these are questions that your group may want to consider and think about in terms of planning a measurable project. How many volunteers can your garden accommodate? So space-wise, how many tools do you have? So finding those specific numbers to ensure that those projects are feasible. And then speaking of feasibility, making sure your projects are achievable. So ensure that you're setting realistic goals based on your available resources, such as the number of volunteers, how many tools you have available, how many tools you may be receiving, the length of your workday, maybe it's 2 to 3 hours, what can you get done? And let's say a project can't be completed in one session, maybe think about how flexible your group is and see if you need to plan a follow-up or a series of work days to get a specific project done. The R is relevant. So ensuring your projects align with your community's goals, their needs, ensure that your projects align with the volunteer skills. So let's say that you want to build or establish a new pathway in your garden. Maybe you do need skilled volunteers to make sure that happens. So assessing the volunteer skills as well as the relevant season. So should you really be starting seeds in the cold in January? Does that make sense? So answering those questions to make sure that your project is relevant to the time as well. Oops, I'm getting too ahead. Okay, and lastly, time-bound, establishing a timeline for each project based on the complexity of your tasks, as well as the availability of your members, the availability of your volunteers, and when you'd be able to access resources. So be realistic about what you can achieve in the available time, but allow for a flexibility in case of unforeseen challenges. And just as an example of a SMART framework project, it might sound something like this. It's very short. It should be short, but touches on every point of the SMART framework. So for example, on Saturday, April 22nd, Earth Day, from 10 to 1 p.m., 3 hours, we will use power tools to build 6 raised beds and fill them with a soil compost blend using shovels and wheelbarrows with a group of 20 volunteers from a local university. So that's a very short project goal, but still uses all of those elements of a SMART framework. Okay, so timing. There is no wrong time to host a volunteer workday in the garden. I'm sure that there's tasks that can be done year-round, including the winter time, but there might be several factors you might want to consider when choosing the best time for your volunteer workday. So first question you might want to ask is, what schedule works best for your garden group? We talked about possibly doing a poll with your group of 100 members and seeing when is the best time to schedule a volunteer day. And this is really key to encourage abiding to folks' schedules and being able to commit to a chosen work date. Will you organize one-time or recurring opportunities? What we see usually a regular scheduled workday, for example, the second Saturday of each month. It's easy to remember and helps keep volunteers consistently engaged, although there are opportunities for one-time volunteering that are great for special projects and volunteers with varying levels of commitment as well. So we always recommend diversifying your opportunities within the garden. And third, kind of random, but also I really like participating in day of service holidays, day of service months, because we often see a surge of volunteer interest on holidays, such as MLK Junior Day in January. There's Earth Month coming up in April, random like Giving Tuesday in December. And although this might sound like maybe corny or cheesy, it does give opportunity for groups to tap into interested and eager volunteers in that event that those one-time volunteers could become prospective members. They could become very active members within your community group. So don't skip out on those opportunities because they might end up becoming and planting seeds for the next member of your garden. Okay, so we're going to lay out like the physicality of a volunteer workday. So while the garden will take place, or the volunteer day will take place at the garden itself, there's a few key details that folks maybe should be aware of to ensure a smooth experience. And again, all of this can vary depending on your garden, depending on what your group wants to do. This is just me speaking from my own work days and how I set them up. So first is a check-in point within the garden. So this is one place where folks can maybe log their hours. Maybe they can provide their email in case they're interested in future opportunities. And ideally, someone from the garden or maybe a partner would be there to welcome volunteers. It just provides space for volunteers to come in and maybe not look so confused because that might happen. And it makes people more comfortable when there's a welcoming experience as soon as they get into the garden. I also usually set up the care station, care about my volunteers. And this is where we set up this self-care essentials. So I always put a first aid kit, very important. You never know what might happen in the garden. Hand sanitizer. If you can provide water, you might be able to provide snacks, maybe from your local restaurant, your work gloves. So just one spot where people can take care of themselves. And it's always really helpful to set this up, maybe in a shaded area that's nice in the summer with some tables and chairs, and just provides folks with the opportunity to rest and recharge and take breaks during a workday. Setting up a bathroom. If you have an on-site portable toilet, that's great. That's awesome. That's my favorite. But then in the event that you're not able to have a bathroom on site, you might want to check in with your local assets to see if there are nearby spots for your volunteers to use the bathroom. So think of maybe your parks, your libraries, your local restaurants that might be able to provide a bathroom for your volunteer days. We have workstations, so establishing places where work can take place. Ensure that your workstations are safe and suitable for the tasks at hand. It could be as small or as large as you need it to be. For example, if you're building a 3-bin composting system, which I'm planning to hopefully soon, you might need a flat and spacious area free from debris, free of hazards to allow volunteers to work safely and comfortably. If you're starting seeds, maybe it takes a smaller workspace. Maybe you want to set up tables and chairs. You might want to set up one table just for the seeds. So thinking about how you're going to lay out the workstation so it's clear for your volunteers and that we can work smoothly together. Lastly, tool storage. Where will volunteers find the tools and the materials they need? For example, if volunteers that come in, it's the first time that they're there, it's nice to maybe walk through the shed, maybe walk through your tool table and letting them know these are the tools that you need to complete the task. This is where you find them. This is where you can place them at the end of the day. And it's very nice if those tools are also labeled with your gardener's name on it. So you know that these are yours. No one should walk away with them. All of this will help save time and reduce confusion at the end of a workday. Okay, I think we set time for another break here.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat from Essence. Does GreenThumb have a community letter template that gardens can use to partner with the community? Also, can we use the GT logo and info so that local businesses recognize the garden as a city garden?
Yeah. Hi, Essence. For your first question, I do have like a project agreement letter for usually garden groups, and then also if there is like an external group involved to lay out exactly like who's doing what, who's supporting with this, what projects you want to get done, and everybody signs it. So that's like a written document that we're all abiding by. So I'm happy to share a community letter template with all of you. Happy to do that for this follow-up email too. In terms of using the GreenThumb logo information, I would have to get back to you on that. I think that's fine. I don't know if Adder or Jessica can step in.
I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I'm happy to ask Alex, and we could get back to Essence on that.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Yeah, there was another question from Cherise about promotion. So do you have more tips on how to actually promote when the garden will be open and specifically upcoming volunteer days?
Yeah, so in terms of promotion, you can use a variety of tools depending on your own community, your own neighborhood. Because I work citywide, and every neighborhood is different on how they take in information. So some neighborhoods might be very digital. They can take in information online. They can browse our website easily. They're on social media, or more likely to be on social media, and they can take in information that way. There are some communities where they like to receive information in person. That's great. They might be communicating or attending community board meetings. They might be attending community events at a local library. So kind of like learning, you're in the community too. So like, what do your neighbors think about absorbing information? I think you can go from there and using a diversity of tools in terms of promotion. So I always go to the local LEDs, the community board office. I drop off flyers and I'm here. Can you please promote this event in your community board? It's free, open to the public, and sharing that information. Usually they're like, we welcome public events and we'll share them. There's your council district as well. And then I always go to local libraries. They also have flyers where you can post. I go to community events and I table there. So if you have any mutual aid groups or events that might be happening, like block association parties, maybe an organization near you hosting an event, maybe offer to share a flyer with them, or maybe physically be there at the event so you can meet your neighbors face to face. And then there are multiple platforms that you can use to promote events. Like if your audience is very digital, you can surely use the NYC Parks website. We love posting your events, and we actually have a event submission form, I believe, for your public events, which we can share as well. There's Eventbrite. You can use Eventbrite to spread the word. In Brooklyn, there's like Go Green BK, which like has a plethora of events. And NYC Service. I usually sometimes post our volunteer days there, and we get folks from AmeriCorps and just general volunteers that are using that platform. New York City Cares, if you have an account with them, you can use their platform. And I will say when you're using more digital platforms, you might get less local volunteers. And if you're okay with that, that's great. And I think, again, just emphasizing a diversity of strategies and doing local and just general outreach for your events. Thank you, Adder, for sharing the event form. I hope that answers that question. And if anybody has any recommendations too, feel free to share it in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves too.
Yeah, and we also have some time for other questions and reflections if anyone has any of those to share, either in the chat or on mic.
Okay. I will move on. And, oh, I already clicked the slide. Okay, this is a preview. Is this the next slide? Make sure. Yes. Okay. So we kind of went through that the building blocks, the skeleton. Again, whatever can apply to your group or may apply to your group, feel free to take what you've learned today and those building block portions. In this slide, we're going to talk about like kind of going the extra mile. I'm hearing a lot of like, how do I retain volunteers? How do I thank volunteers? How do I get more members to become more active? And I've collectively put that under enriching the volunteer experience. So some extra tips, extra tools that you can use to enrich your volunteer day. And so the first one, communicating expectations, or just communication as a whole, I found extremely helpful with engaging with volunteers, getting to know them, getting to meet them. And I usually engage with a lot of one-off volunteers in terms of my own program. So I try to do my best to be able to communicate with them, ensure that they can make an informed decision and prepare for the workday. So the way that I usually communicate with volunteers is usually through email, again, because we're using our NYC Parks website, but you might use other platforms like WhatsApp, maybe Google Groups, maybe word of mouth. So depending on how you communicate with volunteers, really do it consistently and regularly and set clear expectations so that volunteers know exactly what to anticipate from the workday. And this specifically goes beyond simply like outlining the task, like we'll do X, Y, and Z, but also includes providing important details such as what skills are going to be used, if we're going to use special materials and tools like power drills. Some folks might not be comfortable with using power drills. If there are specific plant material that we're going to be touching, some people might be allergic, as well as like what people should bring to prepare for the workday. So maybe people need to bring their own gloves. Maybe people expect that you'll provide them, but you cannot. So just ensuring that people are prepared to actually work the workday. And then also outlining your physical requirements or limitations for the workday. So let's say you're moving really, really heavy material, and if people don't expect that, they might not be able to do that task. So in the event that does happen, maybe you can be more flexible in providing opportunities for a wide range of people with different skills and different abilities as well. Secondly, creating a welcoming environment, a positive, inclusive, safe environment is essential for ensuring volunteers feel comfortable and valued, especially if maybe they're coming into a new space and this is the first time that they're meeting people. They want to ensure that they feel welcome and valued in this experience. So think about your accessibility for your volunteers and their skill levels. So accessibility, not also physical, but maybe language accessibility, the way that people navigate the space, how they retain information. Is it through word of mouth? Is it visual? I know this is a lot to consider, but being flexible and maybe preparing for that type of pivot in your workday. And also an inviting atmosphere fosters a sense of belonging and encourages participation and helps build long-term relationships with volunteers. So once they feel safe in a space, they're more likely to build a relationship with your group and you'll be able to retain those volunteers for long-term. Chantal talked about feeding your volunteers, not only with food, but education as well. So although people are coming to support getting things done, are they taking away something in return? Are you providing them with any learning opportunities? So not just like pop in some seedlings in the bed, but maybe you can share skill in square foot gardening or companion planting. So feeding in those bits of learning opportunities goes a long way for volunteers, especially if they want to practice those for a long term. And showing appreciation is a great way to retain volunteers. A simple thank you can go a long way in recognizing at the end of a workday what you've accomplished as a group. And you can also highlight those little individual appreciations as well. You can go the extra mile showing appreciation by doing a variety of things. So some gardens have a volunteer appreciation potluck. That's one of my favorites. Like every November, I feel like a lot of gardens do a potluck to show appreciation to not just members, but invite folks that have volunteered with them in the past, even if it's just one-time volunteering, even if they're not members, but they're still active. Other small gestures, a bag of produce. Maybe you have an extra tomato or a cucumber and you're like, here, take this. And they have a physical object. They have, food that they know can be grown in a community garden, and that is super effective. Maybe you have some seeds that you've saved in the garden, maybe some wildflowers, and you're like, here, take this home, start the seeds, and maybe you can come back and plant it in the garden. So all of these like little gestures, little thank yous really do go a long way, especially those physical objects, to make people appreciate and strengthen their connection to the project. And lastly, also one very, very important is fostering ongoing engagement. So I know we were talking about retaining volunteers and how to retain those one-time volunteers. When you plan a volunteer workday, maybe you might want to consider providing them with opportunities for ongoing engagement. So let's say you have March 1st volunteer opportunity and you have that set in stone, but people are really curious of like how we can get involved. When's your next work day? Maybe plan a little bit in advance. Maybe what's your second work day? What's your third work day? Maybe you have your membership form printed out and people can sign it right then and there. They can review it. Maybe you have a general interest meeting that's coming up. So making sure people are aware of these opportunities and mentioning that, communicating that during the workday, and maybe providing a physical form where folks can remember all that information. So maybe you can provide a one-pager on those opportunities so that people stay energized, people stay informed. So we always encourage folks to maybe plan a little bit ahead so that you can keep that fire going with the volunteers that you're interacting with. Okay. Maybe I'll stop there for a second. I don't know if folks have, because we're going to go into GreenThumb EarthMonth, a program that we're introducing this year. But before that, if there's any questions from what I've just talked about or what we've talked about so far, I'm happy to answer them now.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay. So sorry, I just have one question. I do apologize if you guys covered it at the start. I guess especially coming from like a organization with the city, when you guys do partnerships, I'm thinking more from the perspective of a local garden. When you do partnerships with other programs, other places, do you guys have like formal kind of plans written out? Have everything good to go? Or yeah, just kind of like what process. Sorry, I'm wording this poorly. What kind of process do you guys go for when doing these partnerships and collaborations with, let's say, other nonprofits or businesses that want to use the space?
Yeah, I think for Green Thumb, we say it's under the discretion of the community group for sure, because it's their garden that they're caring for, that they steward and use. And so we're happy to kind of like funnel that information to the community group, and the community group kind of decides whether or not it's feasible for them to host a local organization, another nonprofit, or another community group. I feel like usually it's pretty relaxed in terms of the community group and agreeing to terms. For Green Thumb, when we're doing special projects in a garden, we pretty much always do an agreement letter, especially if it's like a huge transformation. We're redoing a garden with a community group or with a external local group to make sure that we're covering all our bases and that you're protected, that everybody's protected in a way. So usually it's like an agreement letter with Green Thumb. But if Green Thumb's not involved, then it's under the discretion of the community group or the garden group. And if you need help, you can always reach out to your community engagement coordinator to help facilitate that partnership with an external group. I don't know if Jessica or Adder has anything else to add to that. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about some resources from our new Earth Month program that community garden groups can access, take advantage of, have some fun with us in April. So this new program is called Earth Month at Green Thumb. And like I mentioned before, we get a plethora of interested individuals and community groups. And these are all opportunities that gardens can take advantage of for certain, holidays of the year, especially Earth Month. So this year we are encouraging community groups who feel confident and are willing and able to host their own volunteer events for the month of April. They can sign up to have their event as a part of the Earth Month programming and be eligible to receive some special materials to support your event. And some of these special materials are so special that they need training. For example, some power tools. We have some power tools that we would like to give away, but just for the safety of everyone involved, the garden group and volunteers, we want to help train you on how to use them. So we're providing a carpentry volunteer supply kit, a tool and garden maintenance supply kit and a seed starting supply kit. I will say that your volunteer event doesn't have to involve any of those activities. You can do whatever that your garden needs to get things done in April with a community group, but just know that you can be eligible to receive special materials for future events as well. And I'll say that we have limited number of supply kits. So if this is something that you would like to consider for your group in April, I would get your events up. You can talk to me about it too, or your community engagement coordinator, and complete the form that Jessica put in the chat, and we can go through that too. If I can open it. Let's see. Let me change my shape. And while I'm trying to open the page, I will also plug that GreenThumb will be hosting a series of public volunteer days as well as workshops. Tons of carpentry workshops, seed starting workshops, watering the garden workshops, garden mapping, group development to help you get ready for the upcoming season. So I highly recommend you checking that out. Okay, let's see if I can share my screen. New screen. Okay. Can you see my screen, Adder, Jessica?
Yeah, it looks great.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, you guys are getting the back end because it's a lot easier to show. And just because I'm getting a lot of questions about like the form and what to expect. I'm gonna quickly just walk through this form in case you have any questions. So this is the form in the back end, and we are asking groups to submit their Earth Month events by March 15th, just to ensure that you can receive your supply kit. You can attend some of the workshops that are required to pick up the supply kits, and also so that you have time to submit any material requests that you might need to support your workday. And the first thing is identifying your community garden. And right now we're doing it by borough and community board. So you should be able to find your garden listed here. It's a really long form. Yes. And then after identifying your garden, this is where you put in your event details. It could be as creative as you like, with the event name, the event date, timing, as well as at least the contact person for this event should be listed here. And I provided some options of like what could be possible workdays or projects for your workdays, but there's also another option if there's any special things that you want to do for your volunteer day. But be as specific as possible, please, because I'm going to be taking this information and putting it on our website. Talked about accessibility. Is there any accommodations or infrastructure in the garden that help support accessible garden infrastructure? You can also check out this guide here in case you're not sure. Here are questions about promotion. So maybe you have your own registration form, maybe Eventbrite or Microsoft Forms. You can provide it here. You can also share that registration is not required. You're okay with welcoming people in. Or you may have another form of registration. Let's say you're asking folks to email your group in case they're interested in volunteering. You can provide your social media account so we can help promote the garden and your social media. Right here, question 49, very important. So we may receive inquiries from different types of groups that are interested in volunteering at a community garden. Would we be able to contact you about hosting your volunteer group for your Earth Month event? Most people are saying yes. So you just yes or no, and then the number of volunteers your event can accommodate in terms of the size of the group. And then I'm kind of playing matchmaker on the back end as I receive inquiries. I'm like, I'll reach out to the community group, like, hey, this group is interested in this volunteer day. Would you be able to accommodate them? So we're kind of doing the matchmaker on that end. Okay, supply kits. So while supplies last, GreenThumb is offering 1 volunteer supply kit to GreenThumb garden groups in good standing that are hosting a public volunteer workday as a part of Earth Month in April 2025. So we're instructing groups to let us know what their priorities are in terms of your kits that you want to use, what you want to receive, and these will be allocated on a rolling basis. You must complete this form by March 15th in order to be considered for a volunteer supply kit. You can also say you don't need anything. That's perfectly fine with us. You're like, we're equipped with resources, but we would love the promotional support. You can also say no as well. But just so that everybody gets excited, we've outlined what exactly is in each kit, as well as the distribution. So especially for this kit, the carpentry kit, we would advise folks that wanting the kit that they have the availability to attend the assigned workshop for this kit. So for example, we're hosting a building a wooden raised bed for food gardening workshop on Saturday, March 1st at Redgate Garden in Bed-Stuy. So here's the link. So basically you would need to, somebody from your garden would need to attend the workshop, learn those skills, and then they can pick up their kit here. And when you sign up for the workshop, we'll have that list as well, so we know exactly who is receiving these kits. So here's the carpentry kit, first aid kit, of course. This box here on the top right is a literature box that can be attached to your garden fence. So this is where you could put maybe your flyers. So people walking by can take a flyer and distribute it as you see fit. On the left is a zipper binder where you can have all of your essentials, maybe the GreenThumb handbook, maybe it's your sign-up sheet, maybe it's your garden contact info, anything that you would need in one area so that all your garden members can access that important information. So each kit will have these 3 items as well as those special items. Maintenance supply kit. So this focuses on doing more like weeding, pruning, and tool care in your garden, which is so important. We're doing a garden tool care workshop in March, I'm leading that one, which is really fun, as well as some garden gloves, some pruning tools to help get your garden situated for the upcoming season. And third is a seed starting supply kit. We just thought this is a very timely kit that many folks might use for growing flowers, for starting vegetables, and they come with all the fun tools here, trays, humidity dome, all of your labeling tools. We have a capillary mat to help with watering your seed starting or seed starters, and some grow bags in case you need to pot up your plugs. So we are giving away that, and there's also a distribution here. And then just for further acknowledgement, just ensuring that a gardener from your group is able to attend and pick up the carpentry or the maintenance or seed starting supply kit. And then a space for questions. If you need to contact me, I'm right there, or I can follow. I always like check out the back end responses of this form. So I'll always reach out, especially if you complete this form. I'll always reach out to ensure that we have all of your information correct. I'll reach out to you to confirm whether or not that you received a kit, again, because it's limited supply, but also which kit that you will receive, and other further information that we might need for your event. So once we have that information, we'll post it on our website. And that is, we have a whole, let's see, let's share here. So do you see that parks website?
Yes, I see it.
So we have a whole calendar dedicated for GreenThumb EarthMonth. So this page not only has that form that we just discussed, but also has another form that external groups can fill out with their contact information and their interests, and it goes directly to me, which is great. So groups can check this out. And then it has all of the events happening for Earth Month. So there's a ton of Brooklyn and a ton of Bronx events, which is great happening. But I think Queens needs a little love, Staten Island, Harlem, Manhattan, all of Manhattan needs a little love too. So please, I hope that you will participate in Earth Month.